It's starting up. And we're going.
My name is Matt Marshall. I'd like to call to order the curriculum committee meeting for the month of October. I'd like to go around the room and have everybody introduce themselves, please.
Matt Lillybridge, West Gardner.
Angela Hardy, Director of Curriculum.
And as I mentioned before, it's Matt Marshall and I am from Gardner. Angela?
Okay, I'm going to present. Oh, Carrie, why do I do this? I can do it this way. Can I present using Airtable or not? I just had that. I forgot I still have my old computer.
Yes, you can do
Okay.
everything.
Thank you. Are we all set?
Mhm.
Okay, you tell me when. While she's setting that up, I can just say, what we're gonna do is every fall, we usually go over our fall assessment data after we've had the screening window for using NUIA for iReady diagnostic, and now we use something called early bird literacy at the lowest levels. And the idea is to understand what is our baseline and how is that compared to years past where we can. And then teachers use this in their grade level teams and in their buildings to understand where their group of students is so that we can make better informed instructional decisions to move forward. So we can reach our end of year benchmark goals in the spring. Are you
Can
ready?
you help off of that?
Yes. And oops, maybe. I really like spring to spring data the best because you have the end of one year's data set compared to the end of another year's data set. Browser. Okay. But it's important for you to know, especially given the pandemic, where we are and what we understand about that. And so that's what we usually spend one meeting in the fall doing. It's like chewing gum and walking at the same time right now. Almost there, Terry.
Okay.
Next time I'll bring the new computer. And I'm waiting for you. Did I do it?
Mhm.
Okay, so I can keep going?
Yeah.
All right. So just for clarification, the state has a state assessment. It's required in grades 3 through 8 and grade 11 in math, ELA, and science. The science is always in the spring. A year ago, they changed from one vendor to NUIA, which is NWEA, which is the same assessment we were already using in our system. So in some ways, we've streamlined some of our time assessing students. But to do this effectively, instead of only having a spring assessment, we now have a fall and spring assessment that we report the data to the state. We've always done a fall, winter, and spring assessment, so we're not adding assessment time to our students in their learning spaces. It's the same amount of time. It's just it counts in 2 places. One test counts in 2 places now at the state level and to inform our instruction. So in kindergarten through 5th grade, we use iReady Diagnostic. That's aligned to our instructional programming. And then in grades 3, 4, and 5, they also have to do the NWEA. So that's the only time there's a little bit of an overlap. In K through 5, we use the NUIA in grades 1 through 5, and we now use Early Bird Literacy Screener in kindergarten and 1st grade. So we opted not to put the kindergartners in front of the NWEA assessment this fall. It didn't seem like we needed to, because the Early Bird Screener provides us much more informative data about the learning objectives we have for that grade level. And the kids liked it a lot. It's a game-based app in 2 short segments. And then grades 6 through 11, we use math and ELA, and 6 through 8 and 11 is for the state, and 9 and 10 we added. The high school typically has used the SAT and the PSAT data, but there's such a lag time on that. And now that it's not a state requirement, we won't have a lot of our students taking it, a section of our students taking it. So this gives us data, more actionable data in a really timely way. That hopefully we can look at over time to see if there's some patterns or trends that we can adjust, that we can notice, and then adjust our curriculum to better support the learners. So when we use our iReady data in math at the elementary level, you can see that it gets reported out in 5 categories. So I'd say like the lowest 2 bars we kind of call our does not meet group. It's our group that needs the most amount of intervention supports to help them realize our end of year goals. And you can see this is over 3 years. So the top row is 3 years ago where we were. The second row is after we had 3 months of no in-person learning plus a summer. And then this fall is after we had almost a whole year of hybrid learning. So
Definitely see a pattern.
yeah, there's not much difference between last fall and this fall. The good way to look at that is that our students didn't lose any more. We didn't go backwards over a year of hybrid learning. The disappointing news is that we didn't accelerate. Of course, fall assessments tend to show a lower score rate anyway, because they haven't had continuous learning for the whole summer, right? There's that gap, and we did delay the onset of this assessment to give kids a little bit of time to get into the routine of school. But that certainly doesn't accelerate their learning in a short period of time.
And frankly, I don't think, if you look at 19 and 20, it was only 4 percentage points. Low average only went up 4 percentage points. So that's really not a huge loss.
Right.
So I think actually the trend is maybe we've topped off and we're going to start going in the other direction now.
Well, and during this time, we also have shifted a lot in the way we teach math.
Yeah.
Normally, you would start to see that at this point in the data, you'd start to see the change. But since we've had such interrupted learning, Where, I mean, kids, especially our youngest learners, like 2 days on, 5 days off, 2 days on, 5 days off is a lot of interrupted learning. It's really hard to get some momentum. So I'm hopeful that we can start to see this change by next fall, because at this point we are in school mostly. I mean, the schools are operating 5 days a week.
Mhm.
So,
And there's always the small percentage of kids, because my son is either a low or a low average because he screws around on the computer.
well, right, so it's a digital assessment, and so there are some challenges with any assessment, especially a universal screener, where it doesn't engage everyone. This particular one is a little bit more interesting than the NWEA. It has a few more characters, it changes by grade level so that there's a developmental progression in the narrative. It is adaptive, so if kids answer things correctly, it increases its challenge level. If kids answer things incorrectly, it makes it slightly easier, and then it adapts over time across the different domains in math.
I think this is a positive thing. I do. I don't like I said, I think hopefully we're topped out. I think we'll probably go back in the opposite direction.
I know we're certainly working hard enough to,
Yeah.
to make a shift.
This is good news, actually.
At least it didn't, it didn't drop our green and blue that much more.
Could have been a lot worse.
It's fairly stable data, at this, given the instability we've experienced. So then what I did is I just pulled out the does not meet categories, which is our lowest, usually it's the lowest 30 to 40%, to see kind of what does that look like. So this year is the red bars this fall, and the orange, no, I'm sorry, this last fall was the red, where it's the start of our hybrid learning, just barely coming back into school. And the orange is where we're at this fall. So there's a couple ways to look at this. One is just to look year over year by grade level. And the other one is to kind of look at the cohort. So if you look at grade 2, last fall, they were below 30%. And grade 2 and fall, grade 2, fall 2020, they were just below 30%. So this year they'd be in grade 3 at the orange line, and they're above 30%. So we've had a growth in does not meet. So that's not good. And generally our growth in does not meet is in our lowest grade levels, which makes a lot of sense if you think about the kindergarten, first and second grade years, how formative those years are in schooling, right? And how much we learn in those 3 years of school. And if you're a third grader right now, you spent second grade in hybrid learning mostly, and you spent a portion of first grade not in your building. That's a big period of time where your learning was disrupted. And you can go kind of backwards and see how that is true at each of those lower grade levels. Our upper grade levels have a little bit more stability, both in the meets category and the does not meets category. What I would love to see is a decrease. And we have a little bit of a decrease, but not significant. So then I flipped it and saw, okay, so who's meeting and exceeding last year? Those are the green bars. And where are we falling this year? So as you can see, we're very concerned about first grade. So our first graders had hybrid learning in kindergarten. And we've had some anecdotal data as we've kind of been observing classrooms and spending time with teachers, that our first graders, generally speaking, usually come in quite solid, but they are struggling with some like counting to 5, using manipulatives to help them count to 5. And those are kindergarten skills. So in a lot of ways, we're adjusting what our typical scope and sequence would be for a year. And there's 2 schools of thought. One is go back to what they missed in per grade level and teach that and then move forward. And the other school of thought is identify where you would be, figure out what the prerequisite knowledge is for them to be successful at that grade level and only teach that part that they missed, then teach your grade level content. Then go to your next focus area, think about what they need, teach that, then your grade level content.
That makes sense.
That's what we're trying to do, but there's a couple places where the gap is pretty significant that we're actually just hitting pause and going through a much bigger portion of a pre-grade level learning. I think as we move through the year, we're going to be able to do that just-in-time learning more effectively. It's just on those early grades where there's some real significant gaps. We actually have to spend the time there, because if we don't spend the time there, those little kiddos will never catch up, right? Whereas in the upper grades, we can do a little bit more of that, like just-in-time prerequisite learning. So you can see in our upper grade levels, we are, there's a little more hope showing up in terms of starting the year off as compared to last fall when they had been out for a number of months without in-person learning. So it all depends on how you're looking at it. If you're looking at the students who are really considered struggling, or if you're looking at the students who are already meeting and trying to make sure our supports, classroom instruction and interventions are kind of attending to both areas.
4 and 5 look good.
They're looking better. The challenge with this graph is if you look over here,
Yeah.
it's only 15%.
Yeah, right,
You know, and so we'd really like to see that number higher, by next fall and the fall after, and we certainly will by the spring. But we'd like to be able to hold that through the summer and carry it into the fall. So generally speaking, our greatest area of need in elementary math is numbers and operations and geometry. Geometry is not surprising because it tends to be something that's taught later in the year. Although we did have, we had a little bit more direct instruction in geometry last year because we felt like families could kind of effectively support that and not get frustrated with what some families consider new math and some of the conceptual elements. They feel comfortable and able to support them. And the strength is measurement and data continues to be a strength for us, despite all the learning changes we've been through. This is just kind of an overview in the middle school math. You can see that relative to the number of students in the grade level, we're fairly consistent. A few more in 8th grade on that partially meets that we can move right into meets, hopefully with some targeted instruction this year. Still would like it to be stronger, but we know where our starting point is. And then this is middle school. If we look at that group of meets and exceeds students from last year to where we are this fall. So again, it just illustrates in those upper grade levels, they were able to retain more of the learning that they did receive. And we just want to have more consistency in that in order to get those percentages higher.
Is the biggest deficit between grade 6, is that the rationale that they went from, being in elementary school and now they're in middle school type of thing? Is that are we trying to rationalize it that way, or?
So it is actually a really interesting thing of what's going on in 6th grade. 6th grade in our district typically comes in low and leaves high, but they don't always hold it. They come in low, they leave high, they drop again in 7th grade right at the beginning. So we're starting to look at some of are they gaining a lot more in procedural math, and maybe they have some gaps in their concepts, because then the complexity rises in 7th grade. And if you don't have that strong foundation in concepts and conceptual understanding, then when the complexity rises, you lose your skill in applying the procedures accurately. And so there's all kinds of questions I could ask about this group.
Do they do algebra in 8th grade, or does it start even younger?
So algebraic thinking starts early, very early, and starts moving its way through the system. And then the formal algebra starts really being introduced in 7th and 8th grade, mostly 8th, and then there's a course that students either take in an accelerated course in 8th grade or 9th grade usually.
I'm just showing my age, this didn't start till 8th grade for us.
Yeah, the thinking around, there's a whole strand around algebraic thinking, like balanced equations. We're doing that a lot earlier now, but we don't tell the students it's algebra.
Right.
It's just one side has to equal the other side, that sort of thinking. So here, this actually gives you a good example at the high school, and I didn't do this type of report at the middle school, probably would have been helpful for that answer, but I can. So the high school doesn't have year over year data because the first time they used NWA was last spring. So spring to fall doesn't really tell us a whole lot. And so this is just this fall, so we're kind of considering our baseline. And I just went in to see who was meeting and exceeding against each of the 4 areas we assess in math. So in other words, geometry, statistics, algebra, and then kind of number sense, quantitative thinking or reasoning. And the highest here is algebraic reasoning, which is why I thought it was funny that you asked that. It's consistently higher. So that's kind of an interesting thing. I'm looking forward to talking about this with the math team because we just finished our testing recently, so we haven't had a chance to kind of dig into that and understand that. And our lowest is statistical reasoning. So data, statistics, understanding the impact. So I want to do this now for the middle school and see if there's anything that goes from 6 through 11 and then over time how that plays out. Because that could then inform some of our curriculum work. So I have nothing to compare this to, so I don't really know where this stands this fall compared to other years. I'm guessing we're going to go up. That will
one would
be
think.
kind of exciting. In literacy, as I said, we just adopted a new screener in their lowest grade levels, kindergarten and 1st grade. So as a result, we are not using NWEA in the fall in kindergarten. We're not completely releasing NWEA yet. We'd like to have at least an annual point of data with it so that we can watch that cohort over time, but we don't need it in the fall when they're just getting used to school. So this is it's a skills-based screener. They use a game, that's Pip, the little bird, and they meet all kinds of animals along the way, and they go through this little game, and they get the game. And they have special microphone headphones on that they wear, and they talk to their animals. And then other times they just listen. And they're using touchscreen Chromebooks, so they can just touch the screen to respond. They don't have to know how to type or manipulate a mouse or anything like that. And there's 13 subtests that come with it. So basically there's 13 little tiny games, really short. And it's like 2 20-minute sessions with these kids. But it's categorized into sounds and symbols. So think letter names, letter sounds, that sort of thing. Phonemic and phonological awareness, so understanding what you hear and see with sounds, and oral language comprehension. So it's really more of a pre-reading screener. So there's a little bit of like sight word reading, but it's not significant reading because we're looking for those foundational literacy skills. Where do they stand? We've never had one assessment that gets us all this information really efficiently. We've had a lot of one-on-one conversations between teachers and students, and it's not very efficient. And so we're looking for another way to gather that data that's fun for kids. They think this is very joyful. And they want to do it again usually. And because it's new to us, we still are spending a little bit of time gathering like letter names and letter sounds one-on-one between student and teacher, and then comparing the results. Just so we want to make sure that this is, one, it's good for the teacher, and 2, make sure that the game and the skill match. the true still students, and we just need to kind of have a couple backup plans in place to make sure that data is accurate. So I did not pull all 13 subtests for you, but this is district-wide kindergarten. I just pulled 4 that I thought are like things that people do at home with their children a lot of times, or that we might be familiar with. So there's the alphabet is the letter name. Do they know the alphabet? And the letter sounds, or do they know the sounds that those letters make? And then there's some different sounds like O, right? Or OA. So that there's 42 sounds we're going through, where there's only, what, 26 letters, right? And then rhyming is something that I know as a kid, I did a lot of rhyming with my family. And it's, you think of fairy, like little poems and stuff like that. And then following directions is something we all work on with our children. So I pulled those 4 subtests just because I thought they were really recognizable. And it's interesting. So letter name, you either know it or you don't. So that's why there's no yellow. And
I would have thought that that would be higher.
yeah,
That's all letters.
those are all
So
the
they either
letters.
know them all or don't know them all.
Yep, and we have a lot of kids that come to kindergarten not knowing all their letters, like normally, not just this year. But it's interesting to finally have something where we can start tracking this over time and see what can we do before school. So one of the things that I want to do with this data is to take the students that I have in my list and code them for who went to pre-K and who didn't go to pre-K, and then see what those results are. That's the fun part about looking at data, is it generates questions. And then from the questions, you can seek more information and then see as a system, this isn't about looking at individual kids, right? It's like as a system, what can we do about it to help our learners? What else do you notice?
Well, I was just gonna make another comment about the letter name being so dismal, I guess. I would use the word dismal. I think it's on parents too. You know, my kids went to kindergarten already knowing A through Z. You know, it doesn't just start in the classroom. You know, it starts at home. And I think knowing your ABCs and knowing how to count to 20 isn't unreasonable entering kindergarten.
Yeah, and so half our kids know, just over half our under half our kids know their letter names, and just over half our kids don't know their letter names, or enough of them to be considered like skillful in the letters. So this is actually, I don't have historical data to know like district-wide if that's typical or not. I know that we have kids coming in year over year that don't know their letter names. That I do know. But this like 50% mark, or this half do and half don't, that is something that we have seen over this past year as a trend. And so, you know, it's like some students are coming in with more support, experiences, and resources, and others aren't. And we've always known that, but I think the pandemic is sort of making that even more obvious. I will say with letter sounds, so that's across 42 sounds, and there's like a variance. So that's why you can get partially meets. We have started a phonics program that is sounds first. So we actually teach the sound, then teach the letter name. And we don't wait until like February to teach letter names, but we teach the sound until they become confident in the sound. Then we introduce the letter name that goes with that.
Is this the one with the hand and arm gestures?
Yeah, and there's a lot of movement, and there's a lot of songs, and it's good for kids because they're always moving with it, and they're learning from multiple modalities. So I anticipate in January, when we run this assessment again, that our letter sounds are actually going to increase significantly, and our letter names will increase some, and then by the spring they'll increase a lot. Just because of the sequence and how long it takes for a child to internalize and become really confident, independent, and secure with that knowledge. Rhyming is another one where I'd say, as you can see, half our children are comfortable and confident in rhyming early coming into kindergarten, and half our children are not. And again, I want to look at, you know, is this, you know, what can we do to influence that? And a lot of that it's not reading, it's hearing the rhyme. what rhymes with hat, map, right? What rhymes with pin, fin, those sorts of things, and being able to hear it or hear rhythm in a piece of work.
Is this a Maine thing, a New England thing, or a USA thing?
This, the data or this, or the screener?
No, I mean, just comparison's sake. I mean, is Washington State just clearly the other side of the country?
I
No.
don't know that yet, but, so Early Bird is a brand new screener,
Oh,
but it
okay,
was
so-
developed out of the Boston Children's Hospital and the Florida Center on Reading Research. So as we do, so it's really reputable. And as we do more work with them, I do a lot more learning with them, which will give me a much broader view of where we situate compared to other regions. And that's the part that's still a learning curve for me.
Yeah, I'm not playing stump to jump. I was just
No.
wondering if,
I'm just being honest.
well, and I was like, man, it seems a huge shock that kids don't know, their ABCs when they go to kindergarten. And I'd actually be interested in what it's like in Canada, because my son started at age 4, full-time school in Canada. But also it was a stupid rich neighborhood that we lived in with nannies and all this other stuff. So I'm sure all those kids tested through the roof, but he was well ahead, I'm sure, of any other American kid going to kindergarten, because it was full-time
Yeah.
with 30 other little kids.
Which is why I think it would be really curious to check on which students of ours went to pre-K. And that's not just our pre-K classrooms, but the Boys and Girls Club runs a really solid pre-K program as well, and maybe others. I'm not yet familiar with all of our childcare providers and what level of instruction they're offering learners at certain age levels. But I have heard that some of our students from Boys and Girls Club are coming in really well prepared to kindergarten.
Yeah,
So that's really exciting to hear too.
all of my kids attended the same preschool. It's over here on Northern Avenue in Farmingdale. Kelly Mason, I think is her name. She does a great job preparing the kids that she takes in to learn all this stuff. So yeah. And that could be part of it too, right? I mean, the pandemic didn't offer a lot of opportunity for the Boys and Girls Club or that type of venue over, that my kids had when they were younger.
Or a change.
So maybe I was a little out of line.
Well, no, it's just,
No, I'm surprised.
just ask questions. Like, actually, our Boys and Girls Club had more attendance with their pre-K than we did with our pre-Ks. Because we only had our pre-Ks in 2 days a week in the mornings or in the afternoons, and they had theirs in all week, from what I gather. I asked the other day because I was super curious. So hopefully we're getting to the place where we're at least operating, all of us, with students as much as possible with us. And we can shift this, but it raises a lot of questions, curiosity. The follow directions is important because that's oral language comprehension. Can I hear something, process it, and do it? Can it be more than one step? That's clearly something we need to work on. So I just thought that was interesting.
Yep.
And would share that with you. And honestly, oral and listening comprehension come before a child can engage in reading comprehension, like with text. And so it's really important that we build those skills early. So staying in the line of reading, but looking at the group of meets and exceeds from the kind of early stages of this pandemic to now. It's kind of interesting. Again, a couple ways to look at it is just the grade level from one fall to the other fall, like 4th grade. Last fall came in lower and this fall is higher. But then you can also look at it from the year before. So if you look at the red for 4th grade and the green for 3rd grade, that's the same group of students
Right.
and they're
Same,
stable.
Same as
So,
4, 5.
Yeah, the group didn't increase in the number of students who meet or exceed.
Mhm.
So, it's sort of, and if you look at 4th grade in green and 5th grade in red, it's the same thing.
In 6, 7, it
6th
looks
and
like
7th is different.
they were consistently,
Lower.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we lost 6th and 7th. So again, and we had that question in math about 6th grade, right? So is it the way the learning was designed? Is it a developmental level? Is it the standards complexity changes? You know, there's so many, there's no absolute as to why this is, but it's something to pay attention to.
Mhm.
And I didn't put 1st grade on here because they were in kindergarten the year before, and we didn't assess that fall. So I just looked at 2 through 8. And then we took a test this year that's new to us called language usage. So it's still NWEA, but in grades 3 through 8 and 11, we need to take this now as part of our state assessment. We've never done that in this district. We opted to then do it in 2 through 11. We've learned that grade 2, it was a particularly challenging assessment for learners. We did not have the text to speech feature on for our 2nd graders, who many of them were probably early readers. And so I'm not going to use that data in our analysis until we better understand 2nd graders and that particular assessment. We're not required to offer it, and so we need to do a little more homework. When looking at, and so we're just learning, we don't have any previous data. When looking at where students scored, a couple things I noticed. 3rd grade, you're either skilled or you're not skilled in language usage at that grade level. Again, it's fairly even split. It's a very thin margin for partially meets. And so it just highlights this, like, students who have and students who don't have, and they're all in the same classrooms mixed together, which is great. But what we need to make sure we do is continue to grow our students who are already meeting and work really diligently in skills around language usage for the students who are not meeting. And that's tricky. So that's grammar, mechanics, and writing, but not on-demand writing, more about writing for a purpose, an audience, and revision strategies. Those are the things they're looking at. And then 6th grade is again, we're noticing a pattern. 6th grade has the least proficient data. And this cohort coming up has been, so just so you know, we've been watching this cohort coming up through. And it has persistently been a group of students who have struggled with standardized assessments. And so we are continuing to try different strategies with this group of students to really help them. I'll talk about that a little bit at the end. But so now you're hearing it in math and reading and language. So it's more of a, in this instance, it's a particular cohort. I don't know, we have some also interesting data about that transition from 5th to 6th grade anyway, that we need to keep looking at. And then high school was the first time also. So I just compiled language usage are all the green bars, 9, 10, and 11. So we're over the 40% mark in proficient, higher in 10th grade. And we'd like that to be higher, but that's where we're starting. That's our starting point. And then the reading and all the subtests that go with reading, we're at 40% or a little higher in 9, 10, and 11, with 11th grade just squeaking out over 10th grade. So our goal is to grow that and get, let's try to get up to 50% by next fall and then see where we can go. That's a pretty big jump, honestly.
Was there an opportunity to break it down per school, like K through 5?
Yes, I didn't do that for this group, but if you ask for it, we can do it. It's
Is it interesting?
We do
Is it
in the
interesting data?
building.
You've seen it, I'm sure.
Yeah, and sometimes it's more about the cohort of students.
Yeah.
I do that. We look at it closely per building.
Yeah.
And then compare across buildings by the same grade levels to try to see if we have any patterns I
I don't need you to
also,
waste time doing it. but
well,
it
I
just
also am
interesting.
just aware that it's hard to keep looking at one chart after another chart after another chart. And after a while, it gets
You
to
get
be
lost.
overwhelming.
Right.
So it's like trying to give you like one slice. But that could be something like a winter or a spring data set we
Yeah.
can look at.
You just want to find out if Laura Richards is better than her.
No, I would be interested to see, I would love it that they're all consistent.
Where's mine? Oh, I did high school math earlier, right? Yeah, okay. Thought I lost it. So a few things that we're doing to really help us this year, like, you know, we know that we've all experienced this really different learning pattern. So what's happening, and you all know this, but because we've been talking about it for a year, but I kind of in one spot wanted to make sure that I'm really clear. We have adopted brand new reading and writing programming for kindergarten all the way through 8th grade. This is the first year. Usually it takes 3 years for your data to show growth and an impact, okay? I anticipate we're going to show growth because it's consistent. Every single classroom has all of the resources necessary to implement, which is something this district should be really, really proud of. That's a big deal. It includes a lot of oral language and reading and writing. It's a little overwhelming year one for teachers because it's all new programming. But I've also heard some really lovely stories about the impact this is having on students and that it's fun and interesting. So I would like to get some teachers here to talk with you about their experiences at some point in one of the next meetings, if you'd like that. So you can hear from the real people that do this on a daily basis. Math, we officially adopted a new math program last year, the Ready Classroom. We actually have 2 options in our district, Ready Classroom or San Francisco Math. And, but if they do San Francisco Math, the whole grade level team in the building has to do it. It can't just be one doing one doing the other, because we have those students then feed up to the next grade level. So there has to be consistent language. And we've created a scope and sequence so that the 2 programs line up. So if a child moves buildings, we're okay. They're in like what, they're not gonna have big gaps in content. And I would consider this really to be the first year, even though we implemented it last year, because last year was it's like you taught something 2 days a week and then you taught the same thing again 2 days a week. And so it feels kind of like we're starting all over. And then in the middle school, we have open up and math going on, which is in its partial implementation. So at least 2 full units per quarter are being implemented with that kind of inquiry-based math model, supplemented by a more procedural program for now. And then in the middle school, there's some new social studies programming and a new scope and sequence.
I think with students getting back in the classroom with all the new instructional programs that we have from last year,
Yeah,
I think you're probably gonna see, if you say it takes about 3 years, right?
yeah.
I think you're gonna see the first year is gonna be a skyrocket, and then it'll start to plane off at the 3rd year, and it'll be right where they should have been.
That's what I hope. I hope
Yeah.
now that we're back in schools and if we can maintain that we can get some really nice growth and continuity for learners. You also supported coaching support. I mean, our coaches are at it all the time, partnering. They're positive, they're skillful, they're partnering with teachers. They want to be their partners. They're non-evaluators. They have no connection to evaluation at all. So we have the middle school ELA and math team, and then we have a K2 and a 3-5. So, and we actually just met today and to go over data. And
Yeah, I thought I saw.
yeah. There's a lot of ongoing professional learning, especially at the elementary levels, especially in K1, where we're doing a lot around phonics, phonemic awareness, phonological awareness. I'm trying to get all these right. We've added Heggerty, which is it's a phonological awareness program that's super efficient and blends nicely with the programming we've had. The teachers love it. And we're teaching them a lot about we're using a structured literacy program. So how to use decodable text in small group instruction to support learners in understanding how to read. So we're not using predictable texts so like Dick and Jane, do you remember those stories? So all the pictures are right there and the words are below it. So if you could look at the pictures, you could pretty much figure out the words. That would be a predictable text. We're using text, there are some picture clues, but generally speaking, this child has to actually work through the letters and words on the page to be able to read that page. But it's controlled in that we're not providing them text on skills they haven't learned yet. So it's only on the skills that we're working through. We select the texts that work for that group, and then we move them to the next kind of level on the continuum, and we move them up. They have access to all kinds of authentic texts for all kinds of reasons. So it's not like we don't let them read like about snakes and volcanoes and friends, and they still do that too. But this is a new approach for us, and a lot of professional learning around it. And teachers are incredible. They're just being incredible. And the screener I talked to you about, and we've also added something called intervention blocks K-8. It has its bumps. It's not a smooth process. Because trying to identify there's so many needs, how do you use that block and how do you determine what need to prioritize how do you structure the small groups so kids are always being productive? Some aren't just hanging out over here while teacher works with a few, right? But every building has a slightly different approach, but they're starting to get the hang of it in unique and interesting ways. And I think it's going to make a big difference. It's dedicated time, which we've never had before. Dedicated time to kind of work on some of those gaps so that they can access that core curriculum that they so desperately need to be able to access.
So with the intervention blocks, if a kid has to go to Title I, my son does Title I math. In theory, that's when he's trying to play catch up with the rest of his class. So the teacher would still have something,
Yeah, so if a child goes to Title, so the ideal is the child goes to ELA class or math class, and if the intervention is in literacy, then during the intervention block goes to the Title I teacher. So the child's not missing classroom instruction with all his or her peers. That's the goal. Now, I will inform you that we have a flow chart of decision-making because we have too many kids and not enough time, right? And not enough people to provide those interventions that are out there. Interventions can happen inside the classroom with the teacher. And then there's what we call tier 2 and 3, which tend to happen outside the classroom. They're more intensive, more frequent. We just don't have enough people in that space for every kid that needs it. So the first point of contact is to use the intervention block for like special ed services, specially designed instruction, Title I services, social emotional stuff. If that doesn't work, then we have carved out this flow chart that says you can take them within this 30-minute window of instruction so they don't miss this part of it. And if that doesn't work, then they can take it during this 30-minute window. And it's every grade level, every building has their flow chart figured out. So it's consistent across the district. The priority is core instruction in ELA and math, and supplemental intervention services. So they're getting both and. We're not taking from one to give them the other. If we do that, then they're not getting any extra. It's just being removed from something they would need at their grade level. We are not pulling from allied arts. So they're not missing PE, art, music. They're not missing recess, any of that.
So I know we're focused on ELA, math and social studies, but where are we at with science?
That's on the docket this year. So this district has
We
a
always
really
seem to be
robust,
yeah.
strong science program, and it's happening. It's a little bit of a struggle right now because we use an inquiry-based method in the elementary schools, and it takes time. And we're feeling a little crunched for time, but it's happening for sure. And the curriculum committee needs to convene this year. I thought I would have had it running, but maybe December we'll launch it and then we'll get rolling in January. So that we can do a review of the whole system K-12 and see where we need to continue to grow.
Okay.
And we have new science assessment at the state level, but no data from it yet. Oh, actually something just came out the other day. I have to look at it. that's on my to-do list.
You could lie and say. It's not here.
It's something, well, it's something. I'll take a look, but we had that was a pilot assessment in the spring. And then we'll have it again this year.
Yeah, math has always been this trouble, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's where we're at.
Oh, good.
That was a lot, I know, a lot of numbers. Any other questions on the fall data?
No,
So there is interest in having some teachers come in and talk about math in ELA and what it feels like in the classroom?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I will organize that. Get
maybe
that
have one of the
going.
coaches there.
Yeah, and January, you're gonna have your coaches, because every January they come in and do a like mid-year report of where they're at. So you'll meet all of them in January, but we can certainly have coaches come along with the teachers. And so then the only other item on our agenda is the seal of biliteracy, and that is just an update. Last year, you agreed for us to include a seal of biliteracy as an option for students to earn that endorsement through the state of Maine. And so we followed through, and we actually assessed a number of students last spring. And using those state approved assessments, and we got the results back recently, and every one of them earned a seal of biliteracy. So
Excellent.
I think we're up to 3 now. And with that, they get a letter, individualized letters to add to their transcripts, individualized certificates awarding the Maine seal of biliteracy. We can have, if they're graduating this year, we can get little medallions or ribbons or something to add that feature to their ceremony. And we can add the seal on their diploma if we choose, which is something we need to make a decision about. But I'm super proud of our students. It was a brand new process for us. So we basically said, okay, here are all the rules. Here's how we're putting it into our program of studies. Here's who's in charge of what. We figured that out, who's going to do the assessing, sit with the students, and who's going to order them. That's me. Who's how the guidance office is going to, school counseling office is going to support it. And then what we have to do with the state to follow through. And so it's a kind of multi-step process,
All
but
in the pandemic.
all in the pandemic. And this kid stepped up and said, yeah, we'll do it. And so it's super exciting that they earned it. And it's in different languages.
I was gonna say, is it English,
I
Spanish,
think
or
we
English,
did,
French?
no, actually, we did Russian was one. And then hang on. I think we might have even had Arabic. But we're working with the World Language Department so that we can actually entice some of our students to join us in this endeavor in the languages we offer within the World Language Program.
Those are 2 languages specifically that can make them a lot of money down the road.
Yeah, so they earned it in Russian and Arabic. Yeah. So I mean, for students that have come in with a primary or native language, it's an opportunity to earn, get some credentials in that that can really support them in their post-secondary endeavors. And to do that, they also had to have a certain level of proficiency in English in order to earn the biliteracy. So they have to have both in order to get the biliteracy. So that's super exciting. It means they've made a lot of growth in that language as well. I don't know the students personally, so I don't know where they started from and where they're ending. But I know our staff is really proud of them.
Well, this has been an extraordinarily tough couple of years, and you've done a wonderful job. So thank you for all your hard work.
Oh, this district's doing a lot of good work. We're getting there, baby steps. So I wanted to end on that positive note. I thought you'd like to hear that.
Yeah, good.
Any other questions? Okay. Matt, we did it.
Yeah.
5:29.
Wow.
First time ever before the 5:30 mark.
I was telling Terry, I sent an email to Fox and Friends today. I got up this morning, I was tootling around, getting dressed, and they were talking